everyone, and welcome to Primetime Crime. I'm your host, Lauren Conlin.
I'm your co-host, Jarrett Ferentino.
We're together. We're in a studio together.
In Manhattan, United States of America, New York, New York. It's good to be here, and it's very hot here.
Yeah.
And in the studio.
I was going to say, I melted on my way over here, so that was super fun. But
Yeah,
this is great. This is so worth it. So you are also, are you allowed to talk about what else you're doing, or is that kind of a secret?
Well, I mean, for those of you that watch this show and the other things Lauren and I do a lot of documentaries, true crime documentaries. I think it's fine to say I'm in town to do 3 episodes of an upcoming show.
Yes.
That we're looking forward to, and it's mafia based. So.
Okay, and if you weren't allowed to talk about it, I just totally ruined it.
Well, that's all right. We could say it. I think that's pretty. That's pretty vague.
That's so vague.
It's an Italian guy talking mob stuff.
Yes.
I think that's pretty vague. But,
yes.
But anyway, that's why I happen to be in the city today and tomorrow doing that, and we'll promote that project when it comes out. It'll be a little while yet.
Well, I'm really excited about that, and I want to say that our live last week talking about the Kansas moms and Karen Reed, that was really rewarding for me, and I know it was for you and for the people watching, only because it's so nice to have someone like you accessible. I want to say at our fingertips, because I also use you for a lot of my questions throughout the week and with these court docs, and a lot of us that follow these cases, we have no freaking clue what anything means, or we're reading it and we think we know, but I mean,
I think some of the challenge of my job early on and even through today as a prosecutor, just as a general lawyer, is taking legally complicated concepts and boiling them down. And that's kind of how I always taught them to myself in law school and in practice. I enjoy doing that. I love to listen to people that can do that on podcasts and shows. My goal, if I could accomplish anything in this business, is to take complicated concepts for cases that people are interested in and boil them down that we can understand them, myself and everybody. I mean, I don't have any special skill set other than I've been doing this a long time, and you just acquire over time the language. Yes,
I don't speak
unfortunately.
that. Yeah, I don't speak that. But no, I really do look forward to covering these cases with you as they unfold and as the public follows them as well, because so many of us out there are justice seekers. And I have heard things when I went to CrimeCon, and they're just like, people are so weird that are obsessed with crime. And it's like, no, it's really not about that. It's about seeking justice. It's about, upholding the law, and it's about just finding someone's killer or finding someone's mom. And I think that it's really important.
I think a lot of people come to true crime because of that. A lot of people love to flirt with danger a little bit and to understand how humans can be evil. Humans can be really malevolent, and it's something everyone's curious about. People like, hey, how do people do this to one another? And the other thing is, when you're coming to look, we all have that inside us. I think it was Carl Jung wrote about the shadow we have inside, and we all know it's there. It doesn't mean we're all capable of atrocious acts, but we're capable of some serious shit. And I think in watching and learning about how these evil cases evolve sometimes, you learn a little bit about yourself too.
And the nature versus nurture. I mean, I know, like, with my own children, like, I have a 5-year-old, he's my youngest, and I think this is normal. You can correct me. People can correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh,
but he literally, okay, not only does he talk about his penis nonstop because he's 5, it's really annoying, but he talks about dying and death. And I'm like, why are you saying this? And he'll ask things like, are we going to die? Are they going to die? And I'm like, I don't know why you're asking me this. I don't know how to answer it. And I look back at Jeffrey Dahmer, for example. His dad literally had him dissect dead animals. I guess his dad, what do they call it when you stuff them and they're taxidermy?
Yeah, so he did taxidermy. So the thing is, look, if there's no one-way path, they've seen consistencies with children. I'm sure your son is fine, by the way.
Please.
But they've seen consistencies. One of the weird things, and I never hear anybody talk about this. This is a Primetime Crime exclusive. All of the death penalty cases I've had, we put on mitigation. We don't. The defense puts on mitigation evidence. And the crazy thing is, so many of those cases, the defendants have had head trauma in the past. Violent car wrecks, motorcycle accidents. And all of the and I'm not a forensic psychiatrist. I don't play one on TV. I don't
Super
pretend to be one.
interesting.
But they often look for that, whether or not there was an unconsciousness after the trauma.
Wow.
So look, that obviously speaks to something happening down the road. Doesn't mean it justifies what that particular person did, but it's certainly an inquiry. Obviously, acting out on small animals, acting out on children, acting out on elderly, any of those things, they're all looked into. But again, it creates this cocktail, which on the other end, 2 + 2 = 4. There's no recipe for a true Frankenstein, okay? But there are consistencies you can see, and they manifest themselves throughout their lives. So, but there's no, obviously Dahmer and others have acted out on small animals, and that seems to be one, because it's the psychiatrists say it's a power thing at that point, and they're exercising this urge to have power over a smaller, weaker victim.
Yeah, and I don't know the frequency of his father having him dissect these animals and doing all of this with him. Hopefully it was more than just once a week or once a month. Hopefully he had to do it multiple times, because I feel like, we dissect things in high school, and I'm not a serial killer, and you're not. But going back to what you said about the head trauma, I just did an episode on The Outlier about Aaron Hernandez, because that is just so tragic, and just, I don't want to say it's interesting, but it is in a way, because I do believe that CTE had a lot to do with the actions that he took in his life. And then piggybacking off of that, Daniel Muir, which we've talked about, the former Indiana Colt, he is in some trouble right now. He beat his son, and then he hid his son, and he evaded arrest or something like that. And you got to think, I mean, he was, I believe, a defensive tackle for how long? What happened to his head? Why is he doing this stuff?
And then people say, like, you look at Aaron Hernandez, he played a couple of years in the pros, played in college, like, it was big in high school. Like, these are a lot of games. That's a lot of practice.
He played since he was 8.
But, so a couple of things. Okay, everyone that plays football doesn't end up taking out people and murdering people. So that alone is not the factor. Aaron Hernandez lived his life in a way with no regard for consequences. I've done specials on Aaron Hernandez. There's a book called Killing Fields that I was in. I worked with a man named Dylan Howard that wrote that book, which really looked back on Aaron Hernandez's early years and his college years, where there were it was an escalation of conduct that ultimately led to him in a jail cell for the rest of his life, and then his suicide. I mean, he was wrestling with a lot of demons.
Oh, yeah.
CTE didn't help. I mean, I would imagine.
And the drug use. His brain was also, I mean, you can't, they said he chain smoked marijuana, which I don't give a crap if you smoke marijuana, but you shouldn't chain smoke it.
Yeah. So I think there were a lot of contributing factors there. And I think Hernandez believed he can get away with anything and had no regard for consequences ever. And that was the really difficult part to absorb on the Hernandez case, and he left a trail of victims, some that never got justice. So, do
you think he killed those 2 men in the double homicide?
Odin Lloyd?
No, he killed Odin Lloyd. He was convicted of that.
Yes.
There was a double homicide, 2 men at a Boston nightclub that allegedly spilled a drink on him, and he was acquitted of that. He used Jose Baez, who is incredible, as we know, and I think at that point the Odin Lloyd case was under appeal.
Right.
So things were looking great for him. They were looking so great. His family was like, oh my gosh, we might actually get you back. And then he hung himself in his cell. And it's crazy because he did this so his daughter would get this money and his family would get the money that the Patriots owed him.
Right.
And I think it was in 2019, the judge was just like, this is an archaic law, basically saying that the conviction is overturned.
In death.
Yes, exactly. So he was reconvicted. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, I think as of now he is convicted.
He definitely
and that's just me thinking. I don't know for a fact.
No, he is.
Oh,
they did not get the money.
Okay.
Yeah.
So which is the proper outcome, I think,
he murdered Odin Lloyd. I mean, they had shell, like the bullet shells.
Oh, no,
it's insane.
That one, nobody tried to even cover that thing up.
Stupid. I mean, they didn't have a murder weapon because Cheyenne Jenkins disposed of it, and she's like, they said, where did you dump it? And she's like, a dumpster. And they're like, what dumpster? And she's like, I don't know.
I have a friend, Detective Michelle Wood of the Sergeant Michelle Wood of the Chicago Police Department, and in filming the special we did on Hernandez, they stayed at his house, and she found in the ceiling blocks more guns and more bullets. So,
Stop.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I mean, yeah, I'm so haunted. And Cheyenne Jenkins is still making headlines because she was misappropriating some funds that he left her for her daughter. And then after the Tom Brady roast, I don't know if you watched that, but
Some of it. It was 3 hours.
I thought it was amazing and I loved it.
Yeah,
But
it was
they
great.
did make some Aaron Hernandez jokes because it's comedy. And she did not find them funny. And I totally understand. But again, it is comedy. That happens. But I feel that. I mean, that sucks. They were talking about how I think Kevin Hart used the stool that Aaron, like, because he's so strong. It was just like, I mean.
Yeah, I saw that one. Yeah, it was
remember
good.
that. But the purpose of this episode is I wanted to not necessarily speak about current cases, getting into some of the cases that we've been working on. I wanted to take a break from that. And I wanted to get into some of the cases that you have worked that have stuck with you. And that you, when you go to sleep at night and you're maybe not having a good night's sleep, you're tossing and turning, something that just flashes in your brain that you can't shake.
So after 20 years as a prosecutor, there are no real good sleeping nights anymore. And that's just a condition of the job. And
I'm sorry,
as
that sucks.
it comes with the territory, right? But as I'm getting further away, I've been retired a whopping 3 months now, I think. But
yeah.
You take a little piece of every one of these cases with you. I probably handled, whether I personally prosecuted over 100 cases, that may not be the case, but I was a part of over about 100 homicides, personally prosecuting probably 75, many of them resolved. But I would have to say, looking back now, the children cases, the child victim cases were the ones that probably did the most damage, stayed with me the most, but were the most rewarding to win. So I went to a fortune teller one time in New Orleans. She's been on television. She was on Headline News. Her name is the Bone Lady, if she's still with us. But this was Super Bowl week in New Orleans.
This is part of
this is a true story. So I go down there, and she's reading my fortune, and I'm in like camo shorts and like a tank top, just walking around Radio Mile during the Super Bowl, right?
Okay.
With my brother-in-law, who's a plastic surgeon who did not look like a plastic surgeon that day. So the Bone Lady sits down with us.
Sorry, I'm getting over your outfit.
She's
right
well, it was hot. It was hot in New Orleans.
Okay, yeah,
But
sure.
we sit down, and it's during the day, and she reads my fortune. And she says to me that she sees a child around me, and it's suspected that my wife and I had lost a child. She said a child, dark complected, dark hair, dark eyes around you like a guardian angel. And she said the child had no name. And she and I were talking afterwards, and she said, is that a child that wasn't born? I didn't see a name. She said, I saw an X for the name. And one of the children that was murdered that I prosecuted the case was referred to as Baby X. His name was Xavier Simmons, and he was a beautiful little boy, dark hair, dark eyes. And she saw him. And I mean, look, I believe in a lot of stuff.
Was this before or
this
after?
Was after.
Oh,
so
this was
this
after.
was years after.
Oh.
And she saw that baby around me, which was, you know, something. And there would have been the point of my outfit was there's nothing looking at me that day that would suggest I had anything to do with the prosecution of a child. I had nothing on me that would suggest what I did. I looked like a bum.
No, I wasn't going to say that. I wasn't going to say that at all. But what about Baby X do you think? What do you think about that case? She sensed it, and she sensed
what I think about is that there was nobody to fight for him. It was my job, and I sat with his. He had an aunt that's because his mother was also charged with setting the table for his murder to happen, and I prosecuted her, and she was convicted as well. So, what bothered me most about that case, I was at his autopsy with two of the toughest people I know. And the autopsy the baby was life flighted out of our area about an hour and a half away. So the autopsy was down there. And we drove down to the autopsy with our usual ball busting and kidding around. It was so difficult, the autopsy, because of how rough that process is and how undelicate the pathologist was. And I was at the point in my life where we were having babies and my brothers were having babies. Our house was full of babies. To watch a child, to have succumbed to his injuries and then go through that horrific process. When we drove home, there was not a word spoken. But I could tell you that the person, myself, who walked into that procedure is not the same person that walked out. I was never the same, for good and for bad, I think. But that case, it's a quick story about that case.
Wait, can I ask you, how old was the baby?
He was, I believe he was 22 months.
Okay, so he was almost 2. And,
Yes.
Or no, sorry, he was, he was almost 2. And the cause of death?
Was shake and slam. So.
Okay.
So basically, I said to the jury, so we're in the closing, and I said to the jury, we're closing the case, and I said, what did we lose here? I said, this was a half black, half white baby to be raised by his maternal grandmother. He'd never know his father in a predominantly white community. I said, what did we lose here? And they're kind of looking at me with a weird expression, and I looked at them and I said, last month, that baby was elected president of the United States. That was Barack Obama. Every fact I said was the same as Barack Obama's and Xavier's.
Oh.
Raised by a maternal grandmother, half black, half white. And 2 jurors just broke down right from there. And interestingly enough, in that case, the defense attorney for the mother used an image of the mom holding Xavier in a professional picture and set it down next to her. And in the closing, and I objected to it, I thought it was prejudicial. And she sits down, does her closing argument, and I'm sinking down in my chair as this is happening, right? I pick it up during my closing argument, and I point to the mother, and I said, well, at first I said to the jury, think about what they're trying to do with this picture. They're trying to protect her with the image of this beautiful baby. She squandered this gift. She allowed him to be murdered.
Yeah.
I said, you had him. You don't deserve him. He's with us. And I put his picture on my table. So, yeah, I mean, that's some of the stuff that got. It was a tough case, and I happened to do it with one of my best friends. We were just up and coming as young lawyers. It was a tremendous case to have had the opportunity to prosecute both the mom and the killer.
How did you? Well, so was it the mom and the boyfriend? You said
Mom had a safety plan that she was not to have that. She had 3 other children. She was not to have the baby around her boyfriend, who was a racist and had said things and done things that you wouldn't want your dog or cat or anybody around this guy. Lo and behold, mom goes to bed and left to his own devices. Alan Leitzel, the defendant, kills the baby. And mom's violation of the safety plan resulted in a manslaughter charge. Alan was convicted of first-degree murder.
I am so sick of hearing about this. Mom's boyfriend can't control his anger around the kid and then kills. I'm literally sick of hearing about this. It's so ridiculous. It's just, I mean, what, I don't know what women are looking for, I guess, to an extent when they are dating now. I mean, I've been married, you have, for a while, and I wouldn't know. I mean, you think you know
well, certainly
someone.
Nobody's looking for a baby killer.
Well, but I'm just saying, you think you know
like,
someone, and it's like the minute they snap and do it the first time, you would think and you would hope that these women would be strong enough to leave. And I understand all of the circumstances.
Oftentimes,
and I'm not shaming anyone.
It's not their child.
Right.
So a couple of things where you see this. The reason he was convicted of first-degree murder, he had a psychiatrist come in and say he was undergoing what's called an intermittent explosive disorder. Okay, and I said, doctor, is that the name for bad temper? Is that what you're telling me, right?
Yeah.
And one of the factors, and the doctor's a good doctor, he's done some great work, but he said one of the factors was remorse, that immediately after you would show remorse. And I would say, doctor, these 4 factors are like 4 legs on a stool, right?
Yeah.
I said, remorse. I said, if Mr. Leitzel made a racial slur referring to the baby in the moments after and weeks later about the baby, would that be indicative of remorse? Absolutely not. And I said what the racial slur was. It was awful.
Okay.
And he
said he called the baby?
Oh, yeah. So this is afterwards. He said, no, that would not be indicative of remorse to me. The doctor did. And I said, you cited these reports you reviewed. Open page 85. And it was a statement of the defendant where he referred to the child in this racial slur. So taking out this particular intermittent explosive disorder, but that was what led to it was an intentional act. It happened over a period of time, albeit short, but it was enough to get a first degree. Typically, they're third degree. They're just people in a rage do these shake and slam baby cases. They're tough. They're the ones that stay with you.
Yeah, and I just, like I said, I wasn't trying to shame any women at all, but I hope and pray that if this happens to a mother's child with her boyfriend, that she would have the guts to leave and go to the police. I've
seen when this happens too. Moms in the moments and hours after when the child is being treated, now Xavier died at the house, but if actually that's wrong. He did die en route to the hospital. Oh, God. Mom was lying about knowing what happened, if she did or she didn't. But I've seen that before where moms are lying to protect. I had a case where a baby was exposed to fentanyl and died. Beautiful little baby boy.
Were they cutting it, selling it, doing it?
At some point, we suspect that's what happened. I mean, but we don't know necessarily how the child. Then I had a case where a baby was dehydrated to death. The baby dried to death. I mean, these are just when you asked, this is a tough episode.
Yeah,
but then those cases stay with you, and obviously, and we'll do a show on the Hugo Selinsky case, but obviously Hugo was a somewhat infamous serial killer. I had that case for 9 years, and we successfully prosecuted it. That one's always with me. That was the one. And then Brittany Drexel, of course. Those were the big ones I had.
That one sticks with me. But we are going to do Hugo Selinsky, a full episode on that. But I just want to go back and ask you something. And if this sounds dumb, please forgive me. Everybody forgive me. You don't have to go to every single autopsy report of a homicide that you're prosecuting. Is that correct?
No, but I do.
But you do.
I do. Okay. So why you do that? So I go typically, when I say I do, I'm not some, many of us do, I would say. Like, it's good practice because you're going to have to elicit that process out. You're basically going to have that pathologist on the stand. And having been there and experienced the process, I've taken Dr. Bodden through this process. Say, Dr. Bodden, what day did you take us through? What is an autopsy? What day did you conduct it? Take us through the steps. And I was there. I experienced it with him. So I'm in a position to really appreciate that situation. Yeah. Also, there are times you don't know what happened. It's important that you're there. Maybe having done this so many times, you ask a question no one else is thinking about. Yeah. That's another reason to be there. But it's important that you familiarize yourself with the process. It brings you in. There's a closeness there. It's the autopsies, for the most part, except for the ones with children, aren't too bad. For whatever reason, it's important. It's part of the investigation.
Open. They're not the body. Again, not to sound dumb, but the body's not like split open in front of you.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it actually is.
Yes.
Well, then why is that not so bad? Sorry. I'm like, I just don't know. It actually
awful.
is.
The only part we typically would step out for is when they saw the head open.
Oh,
but then we come back in. But it's a medical at that point, it's a medical
Totally
procedure.
get it, but this is why I never wanted to go to med school, because I'd vomit.
But here's the thing. So when you're at an autopsy...
That's not the only reason I wouldn't get into med school, but yeah.
But when you're there, like, it just personalizes the experience. It prepares you to... The doctor's the one who has to testify to their findings and their conclusions. But you're the one who has to elicit that information in a conversational way, and you're the one who has to tie what you learned in that room to intent, to cause and manner of death throughout all your case. So it's important you're there. I go to the homicide scenes. I mean, we're called out to homicide scenes.
I get that, and I always knew that. I just did not realize that you would be there for this process of dissecting.
Not all. Like, if it was a straight-up shooting case where you see somebody took a bullet in the head, sometimes you're not there. Although if you think it's going to be a self-defense or somebody's going to claim suicide, you're there because you're looking for stippling or burn marks near the gunshot wound, which suggests proximity. So there are times where you need to be there. If there's times where cause and manner of death are quite clear. I had a case just a few years ago where a woman was stabbed multiple times, and it was clear what happened. The guy admitted that night. I did not attend that autopsy.
Yeah,
I was home sleeping, catching up on my sleep because we were out all night.
Your lack of sleep, you mean.
So that one I didn't necessarily feel the need to go to. And I'm not haunted by those. Those were more, like I said, I treated those in my mind like a medical kind of experience. What is haunting is the pain and the aftermath, and the fact that everyone in these families, put so much faith in you, but at the same time, pressure on you.
Right.
And it's something you accept in the job, but it's also something that stays with you. I mean, it motivates you in a sense, but that's a tremendous amount of responsibility. Here's people you don't know who have been through something so horrible, and they put, oh, by the way, we'd like you to fix it. Thanks.
Yeah,
All right, great.
I know.
Great.
I can't. I really can't
tough.
imagine. I can't. I cannot. And you know, we talked about Karen Reed and John O'Keefe, and obviously there was a mistrial. And John's brother Paul did an interview last week, and it was making the rounds. And listen, I'm just shocked at the amount of people that feel the need to attack a victim's family member, whether or not you agree with them.
Right.
And look, everything Paul O'Keefe said, did I agree with all of it? No, but who gives a shit if I agree with it? It's his family. And also, he's coming at this, he's worked with Lally. He's worked with the prosecution for God knows how long, 2+ years. Of course, this is his stance. And again, it's. I feel like it's not on the public to necessarily make our judgments or our opinions on.
What's the stance that O'Keefe was saying that they're?
Well, he essentially said, and listen, I broke this down statement by statement. It was we believe first, and then it was like we know. And again, I'm not judging him, but he said, basically, everyone knows that John and Karen's relationship was going downhill, and in a jealous fit of rage, she ran him over. And even if you think she's guilty, I don't see that as to what happened based on the evidence, right? And based on the, not to get back into
to
this,
me, but again.
But he can say whatever he wants.
Well, and the other thing is, he doesn't have to prove it to himself beyond a reasonable doubt. If that's what he believes, that's what he believes. I mean, look, that one's a tough one. All right. I have a personal belief. Does that mean I think they're going to be able to meet their burden? And the other thing I said last week, and it was one of the clips we shared, where I was saying, get a biomechanical engineer. Somebody wrote, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. They'll never get one. Here's a news flash. You can get an expert to say pretty much anything. There is a biomechanical engineer on this planet that will agree with them. That doesn't mean they're
agree with Trooper Paul.
That doesn't
I don't
mean
know about
no. The problem was they brought a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah.
Trooper Paul's qualifications pale in comparison to a bio expert, right?
But don't they have to stick with that for trial number 2?
If
it happens.
We're going down the Reed rabbit hole.
I know.
Again.
I didn't mean to do this.
But wait, no, they don't. They obviously can't change Trooper Paul's conclusions, but they can amplify them with a biomechanical expert. They can. Whether you like it or not, whether you believe she's guilty or not.
That's a great word.
They can.
No, you're right.
So if there's a commenter out there that says, hey, Jarrett, I understand what you mean. They can. Doesn't mean I have to like it.
Yeah. And
it doesn't mean I think they're going to carry the day, just so we're clear.
You're right, though. They can amplify the nonsense that he said in hopefully a way that makes sense and a way that holds facts. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but who remembers when he's like, how did he get from, point A, 30 feet holding a cocktail glass? He just did. Yeah, amplify that. But just since we're talking about it, we won't get into it, but also Alan Jackson has filed a motion to dismiss 2 of the charges that Karen Reed was facing. So we'll see how that pans out.
Let me say this, two things. If I don't mean necessarily amplify, maybe amplify wasn't the word. The shortcomings of Trooper Paul with regard to his experience and his ability not to make certain conclusions can be amplified or made through someone with the requisite experience to do so. That's what I'm saying. Doesn't mean they're going to do it. Everybody calm down. Everybody take it easy on.
Nobody can calm down when it comes to this case. Just FYI, nobody can calm down. So whatever. But yes, Alan Jackson is submitted a motion to dismiss 2 charges, the murder 2, and I don't know how you say this. I don't have the paper in front of me, but leaving the scene of.
So it would have been leaving the scene of an accident involving injury?
Yeah, something like that. So, and again, forgive me for this. I don't have it in front of me. I should have, but yeah. So we're gonna see what happens with that. But have you seen anything like this before, where this was possibly the case where the jury was unanimous on 2 charges, but it still is a mistrial?
Yes. So
should the judge have disclosed that to the defense?
I don't know what she was told. Okay, I know what they're saying she was told.
Right.
Have I seen it? The answer is yes. Okay,
Okay.
and then it was declared a mistrial. Now, in the first Hugo Selinsky trial, that was ultimately an acquittal.
Yeah.
The first trial for the first 2 killings, this happened, where there was a jury hung on a certain charge but undecided on another, and it resulted in a mistrial on the entire indictment when it arguably it could have gone the other way, where they say, hey, we could retry him on this particular crime. It's difficult when it's over to now put the toothpaste back in the bottle. It is. This is the same thing that was happening in Murdaugh. When you go down to Murdaugh, now we're litigating jury stuff. So we had the clerk making statements that were leaving impressions on the jury, and his team of lawyers drove. They drove through the deep country and got these jurors back and filled out some affidavits. So it's strange territory. I've seen it happen. I don't know if Judge Bev is going to overrule herself. Where it goes in the appellate world, I don't know. Someone other than Judge Bev will look at this particular issue. But again, before we light up our commenters, I'm talking general. I haven't looked at that motion, and by the time this particular episode airs, there's going to be a lot said about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been kind of vocal in thinking that Judge Canoni in this was not my favorite in terms of like she sighed very loudly, and maybe she didn't know the microphone was right there, but it was constant. She just seemed to have no patience at all.
And not everybody's TV ready, and I think a lot of here's an individual who's used to being in charge of her courtroom, dealing with a tough defense team, who didn't have to worry about going back in front of her on another case down the road. Cameras on, the eyes of the nation on her.
Yeah.
Some people have a tough time with that. There were some things I saw. There were some moments of levity, which you have in a courtroom, which I think is weird to see play out this way.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, who am I to judge a judge? I mean, whatever.
No, you're not. You're not. I'm the one sitting here talking about it because it bothered me, and I've done a few TikToks on her alone because I'm just like, wait, what? Are you serious? The whole jury slip was baffling to me, and
it's
I think
confusing.
that was
very
confusing. But when Alan Jackson was like, this is an automatic appeal if they, and she was like, oh, I don't know if somebody called her when she got back into her quarters, but yeah.
Well, so the judges have clerks.
Yeah.
So they have clerks that are lawyers that work for them. So when they came back, when a lawyer says this is an automatic appeal issue, the judge's back is up. Because that's, sometimes you're dumping a plate of shit on the judge. You're just like, hey, by the way, they're doing it in Kohlberger. They're saying, hey, if we go to trial before I get this discovery, it's automatically I'm ineffective. And John Judge there, that's basically saying to the judge, we'll be back in 2 years to do this all over again if you make us go forward now.
Yeah.
And with Judge Bev, when they're saying that to her, that shakes you. I mean, I've been a judicial law clerk. I've worked for judges. I've been in the chambers when they go back. I'm sitting in the courtroom and hear them say that. I've said that to judges.
Yeah.
And what I would say is, like, you're creating a situation where a judge can overturn a case. You say, Judge, this is your discretion. It's within your discretion right now. You could do this.
Right.
And,
right.
But look, there's so much to this. It's hard to say what's going to happen, but there's a lot coming still.
Oh my gosh, I know. Can you imagine? I don't even have skin in the game, and I'm just like, I cannot believe there's another hearing on July 22nd, and this is not over. And it stresses me out.
I want to do an episode where we don't mention Karen Reed.
I know. I can't help it. It's me. I can't help it. But I want to go back to Brittany Drexel because that is a case that stuck with me, and I have no skin in that game. But part of it was just like, I guess, thinking about this sick joke from God in a way, and I apologize if people out there are not religious. I am, and I believe in God, and just knowing that this girl, her mom said, don't go on this spring break trip because bad things happen when you're on spring break, and this poor girl did what so many of us did. We lied to our parents to go do what we wanted, and then she was kidnapped and assaulted and murdered. And I'm just like, wow. I mean, talk about a sick joke. I can't get over it. And the fact that it took how long
13 years
to bring her killer to justice, and then not just that, but find her body. That was another thing. I mean, it's bananas. And I know that you worked very closely with her mother, and her mother just seems like an absolute solid rock. I mean, just so
she
strong.
is. I mean, and believe me, there were weak moments too. I mean, for everybody, that was a tough. If it wasn't for the commitment from Don Drexel and the 3 FBI agents in particular in that case, it would have never ever been solved. You know, that if we can do anything for the people that watch and enjoy our show, I can't say enough of how important it is. If you're a victim, if you have a loved one that's a victim, okay, do not go quietly. Don't just accept what you're being told, challenge and question, and if you're not being told anything, go public. Because as a prosecutor who saw it from the inside out and worked from the outside in, that pressure speaks volumes. And I'm not saying be disrespectful, but don't go away. Don't accept as gospel necessarily. If you suspect not enough is being done or you're being kept out of certain information. Now, there's some information that you cannot share, but I have had hundreds of meetings with victims, and I try to keep them as informed as I can. And if there's information or questions I can't answer, I would explain to them why. Here's the answer. I can't answer that question. Here's why. And it worked. Typically it worked. Sometimes I would have to explain that more than once, which I'm fine with doing, and most prosecutors should and would be. But, you know, I was looking into a case, Bruce Blackwood, for some of the work I was prepping for the shows we're doing this week. And that was a case where his brother never went away. And Bruce was an African-American man who worked at an off-track betting facility, and his brother kept the pressure on. And that murder was solved because his brother and a detective who was committed just never stopped. And Don Drexel is the same thing. Like, if Brittany's death can teach us anything, which is don't walk alone during spring break, that's number one. Number two, if you can learn anything from Don, is that mothers are amazing and very, very strong. It's that kind of pressure doesn't fall on deaf ears. I think that she's a shining example of how she was powerless. She went, and I said this, she went from being desperate to determined. And when you have a mother determined, good luck. Good luck.
No, you're absolutely right.
This was a mother determined against a violent, sexual, kidnapping, murder predator. He's doing life. She's fine. It's the way it goes.
Yeah, not to get too morbid, but I also can't imagine, you know, she's obviously gone through so much, and it was a crazy roller coaster. But at one point, she had to live how many years thinking that her daughter was, not that it's so much better the way that she actually passed away, you know, or was murdered with Ray Moody, but she had to, what was it, 3 years she thought
there were several years where she thought Brittany was raped, shot,
gang
and
raped,
fed to alligators.
It was like gang raped.
In a stash house and fed to alligators.
But let me go back. They thought she was gang raped and that she ran away from the house naked and she escaped. Yeah, and they shot her in the back, rolled her up in a carpet, and then fed her to alligators. And this was told by some jailhouse informant or something.
Yes, that was the version of events that was told by a jailhouse informant implicating the members of a family in South Carolina who I met when I was down there.
Felt bad for those guys.
Yeah,
My
the Taylors.
Goodness.
And I hate to republish their name in this context, only to say they had nothing to do with Brittany Drexel's death. And I met them and their pastor when I was in Myrtle Beach with, on one of the occasions I was in Myrtle Beach with Don. And boy, after studying this case for that long, to have had the opportunity to talk with them, and you know, Dr. Phil and everybody covered this case, and the Taylors were all over, and to have had the opportunity after seeing this as an outsider, suspecting that what was being reported by a jailhouse informant was true, and then years later to learn these guys had nothing to do with it. It was you know, it was enlightening. It was quite an experience. So
that's what I mean. And this mother, she had to think about that every night when she goes to bed. And I just was like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine. And then just to know, the truth. And I think we've touched upon this before at an earlier episode, and I keep saying this, but we do have to do one-off episodes on some of these cases where we can tell the story from the beginning, because it is just insane and people can learn from it.
We'll have to have Dawn on one time. She'd love to be on.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I would love to have the opportunity to speak with her and just,
And then with that, out of tragedy, oftentimes you find some good things, and Dawn, and she built a team around her that was so impressive. It was really cool. And like, I was, not that I was late to the party, I was kind of they didn't have an attorney on their team at that point, and I joined their investigative team, and she had an investigative journalist, and just a team of volunteers that worked really hard, and just never went away. And I can't say it enough, And she's one of those people you just, when you meet Dawn, she's not somebody that takes no easily as an answer, but you don't want to tell her no either. So she's somebody you want to help.
So do you still keep in touch with her?
Oh yeah,
you do.
Oh yeah. Okay. Everybody from that case. That's another thing. So when you do these cases and you're through a war with a victim's family and the witnesses, I have a real hard time, and not in the Drexels they're like friends of mine. That's a different situation. But in all my cases, I cannot tell you how many witnesses and victims' families and defendants' families still show up at my private office.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Whenever they have a legal need back home, you're through this horrible situation together.
Yeah.
And I would try to be a source of strength for people, fight like hell. And I think going forward, as they need things down the road in the legal system, to this day, I was reached out to by a victim's family member in a case I had several years ago to talk about some legal matter they're having now. It happens. It's part of.
Yeah.
I don't know, and that's not necessarily a noble trait. I just don't know any other way to be. I invest myself in these cases.
It's noble. What do you mean?
Yeah, but when you don't like I never fancied myself as like the world's greatest prosecutor, but you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody who gives more of a shit than me and cares more. And that's the way I looked at it. I was like, I can control that. Like, I may not be the best, but I am going to lead with my heart, and that's the way I did it. And I think that it worked for the most part. And I always had really good second and third chair lawyers with me, like Ivy League educated people. So.
Yeah, but no, I think it's really important to be passionate, lead with your heart, because you can't fake that. I think that's one thing. People can fake a lot of shit. You can't fake that.
Well, and don't you think, and that's what's cool about what we're doing now, because we get the chance now to tell these stories and meet people involved in these cases, and I don't have to worry about actually prosecuting them. But one of the things is you get the opportunity to walk someone through this system and explain to them, look, I've been here before. It takes this much time, or that piece of evidence may be out because of this, and things of that nature. I think like it's an enjoyable experience for me to be involved now on the periphery of cases beyond northeastern Pennsylvania. Let's put it that way.
Well, right. And like you said, you're not necessarily prosecuting them, but you're helping so much. You're helping calm these people's nerves. You're answering questions when it comes to some of the paperwork and the motions. And as we spoke last week, and on our live about Nikki McCain, a lot of people are very frustrated with the DA, and I completely get it, because this DA in particular, I did some research on her. She's supposed to be a family advocate, an advocate for victims that are
everybody who's running for DA says that. By the way,
no, she started something called actually started something like a whole department that prosecutes victims that are women and children, and so I think a lot of people were like, okay, well, you can't necessarily do anything about this because your star witness is not here, Nikki McCain, but you made a good point. She doesn't want to do this again, so and she wants to have a rock solid case here, so that makes sense, as frustrating as it might be. Additionally, there might be some other things that she's working on behind the scenes.
We don't know, and we don't know, but let me say this: if Miss McCain, more likely than not, she's met a violent end, sadly. She's missing. She has not responded to anyone. This is out of her character. the other alternative is she's absented herself from the jurisdiction to avoid having to testify. Doesn't sound like that's the case at all. So I don't know why the DA is doing what she's doing in this particular case, only to say this. I am sure she cares. I am sure she knows what a big deal this is. I am sure there are things in motion that this guy doesn't necessarily just walk away. I think they're looking very hard at what happened to Ms. McCain. And I don't think you want to start this off with an acquittal.
Well, so if the charges are dropped, is that an acquittal?
Well, it's a nullity at that point.
She said, we reserve the right to reopen this.
She does. So they're not. That's important.
Yeah.
Because they're not gone forever. So if there is not something, if there's nothing found out before that timeline runs out, okay, you have a certain amount of time you have to bring those charges. So
right.
And that clock starts ticking when the first arrest occurred. So she's under a very, very short timeline. However, she didn't dismiss them with prejudice. That's what that means.
Okay.
So the case could be reopened. Again, I think she's hopeful there are additional developments in the prosecution ultimately of him down the road.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I've definitely been digging into this, and we went over a lot of it on our live. But yeah, I feel whenever it's a missing mom, and kids are left without their mommy, it really gets me. And that's not to say I don't feel for other cases, because I absolutely do. But this one just gets me because when the kids are little, they don't understand.
Well, and
they think their mom left.
It echoes. And look, I lost my dad when I was a kid, and like losing a parent, it changes the trajectory of your life forever. And if that and my dad died naturally of terminal illness, but when you lose a parent that way, there's never an explanation as to why. And particularly, what if it was at the hands of another parent too? Like, so their lives are impacted forever. In fact, their children's lives are likely impacted too.
Right.
So it's like this murder echoes in eternity. The consequences of it, the therapy that will be needed, the way they live their lives for the next 70, 80 years will be as a result of this violent act, if that's what happened here. That's why it's so jarring too. A life is ended and potentially other lives are destroyed.
Yeah, I could not agree more, and I wish we could end on a happier note. But
we're gonna have, what does Seinfeld have, the super happy fun hour?
I know. I honestly
we'll find a reason to do that.
God, we really need
Justice
to.
is happy. We'll get there. It's not on everybody's timetable. We've got to be patient. Everybody's got to be a little patient out there.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what else I'm following? I'm following Justin Timberlake's DUI.
Oh, I thought you were going to say
that's funnier, right? I mean, that's
the presidential election or something.
No, I'm just saying.
Nothing going on there.
He's due back in court via Zoom at the end of July, so I'll be following that.
He's on tour though, huh? He got the tour going.
His world tour. Oh God, I got in a fight, not like a fight, but I got in like a tit for tat with a friend's husband over this, and he was kind of just like, everybody drives like that in the Hamptons, and I was just like, bro, that doesn't make it right. And then I said something like, and I knew what I was doing. I'm not even like this. I'm not even that person, but I just couldn't help myself. I was just like, well, I don't think that people that have lost loved ones in drunk driving accidents would,
that's definitely a dude I wouldn't get along with. Everybody drives like that in the Hamptons.
I'm not even like that. And he was just kind of like, you're being a little righteous. And I was like, wow, I don't think of myself as righteous ever. I don't think of myself that way.
There's certainly been bigger screw ups than Justin Timberlake driving drunk.
But I'm just saying.
But again, dude, Uber or have a driver.
Maybe I don't like Justin Timberlake anymore. Maybe that's what it is. I'm not sure. I can't figure it out. But I really can't get over this. And everyone's like, get over
Justice for JT, right?
No justice for JT.
It's unfortunate, but
he had coke eyes. Those pupils were like, I'm sorry. That was insane.
Didn't the talks come back yet or no?
No, I don't think so. But, there was other videos circulating with him. Obviously, allegedly, everything is alleged. I don't know if he does coke or whatever, but it sobers you up if you do coke. So maybe he did have one drink and he did a whole bunch of lines, and then he got in the car and drove, and he wasn't necessarily wasted, but he wasn't in his right mind.
Yeah, but that's not something you could hide. I mean, ultimately, the truth will come out in his examinations. But if it was just a situation where he drank too much.
Did they even do that though? Like, I feel like his
What, do
lawyers
they
were
take
like,
his
no.
blood?
I don't even know if they did that. So I'm not even certain.
They likely drew blood unless he refused.
I don't know. I called the Sag Harbor police like 4 times.
You're
left
doing
messages.
a real deep dive into
Oh, I
this.
literally did. I called the courthouse. I mean, I was angry that nobody tipped me off early in the morning. I would have driven out, but you know, I'm just crazy like that.
Look, like I said, not to diminish what he did. It's obviously a crime. It's serious, but I don't know. I mean, some of the things that have come out of Hollywood over the past several years, it's like there's a lot.
Okay, but
worse
don't
shit going on.
compare. Don't compare beating the shit out of your girlfriend and like raping multiple people to it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want us to become as a society.
No, but I mean, I
desensitized
felt like he was immediately maligned in that way. Like, that's what I'm saying. I'm not comparing. I'm saying like, you know, it was almost like, oh, Justin's on that list now for drinking and driving. It's like, man, there's levels of problems.
I get that.
You know?
I agree with that to a degree, but for me, it was all about the fact that he wasn't sorry. All I wanted was some kind of statement that said, guys, I was, you know, or, you know, he doesn't have to admit to any guilt before he's, you know, convicted.
The only thing I would say about DUIs is this. Most jurisdictions allow for one bite at the apple, where where there's not an accident, you're caught for the first time. By all accounts, this is the first time he's been arrested for this charge. He would be able to enroll in a probationary program, which would result in him not even admitting guilt. And that's just the way it is. It's not because he's Justin Timberlake. It's because that's what the law provides for. Okay? What does that tell you about the world's attitude on DUIs? It says we kind of get a bite at the apple here. Unfortunately, that's the way it is.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just,
You know?
I don't know. The first words out of his mouth, "this is going to ruin the tour," really bothered me. And I was just like, man, how about I just ruined the tour? What I just did could ruin the tour. Just take a little bit of accountability. And again, I'm not saying you have to admit guilt, but you can acknowledge, like, my daughter loves that stupid song from Trolls, always playing it, and I have to hear his voice nonstop. And you know, he didn't ask to be a role model, but here we are with second graders, you know, singing it. Just make some kind of statement. Ask for privacy. Ask
He'll
for
get
support.
there. It won't be long. He'll be doing an interview, the apology tour. It's how it goes.
I don't know. And again, you don't have to admit guilt. I just wanted something a little more. But anyway, this feels like a happier note to end on. So, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe Primetime Crime Show on YouTube. It's also available via audio, but we would rather you watch us. I feel like
if you
that's more
like
fun.
it or don't like it, share it and tell your friends.
Even if you don't like it. So, Jarrett, I will see you next week.
All right. Take care, Lauren. Great to see you.